Hey dudes, Silvite Soltis here, and today I'm back with another tips and tricks video for your viewing pleasure. Do you like to do damage, but hate the idea of being too close to enemies? Does the idea of casting spells or shooting arrows appeal to you? Do you like being able to actually see what's happening around you? Well then, you're probably a ranged DPS. So, grab your water, pick up your pet from the stables, and get your spellbook ready, because today I've got some tips and tricks for how you can be effective in classic dungeons as a ranged DPS. As always, if you enjoy this guide or find it useful, then subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you can get more content like this in the future. But anyway, let's get right into the tips. As with any class or role, there are a number of things you should take care of before you start heading out to any dungeon. First and foremost, make sure you have appropriate add-ons for dungeon content. The four main ones to be sure you have are Threat Classic 2, which keeps track of the threat on enemy targets, Decursive, which allows quick and easy dispelling of debuffs on your party, Recount, which tracks damage, healing, dispels, and more, and Deadly Boss Mods, which gives timers and warnings for dungeon encounters. There's a lot more amazing add-ons that you can make use of, but really these four are the biggest ones when it comes to dungeoneering as a ranged DPS. Next up, be sure to bring enough water or a mage for your dungeon run. Other than wiping repeatedly, not being able to drink up to replenish your mana is, in my opinion, the worst feeling in a dungeon. So avoid that situation at all costs. Also, while you're in town picking up water, make sure to empty your bags of non-essentials as well, especially if you're a hunter. In any given dungeon run, you can expect to pick up around 10 to 25 items, so make sure to have plenty of space. Finally, before the dungeon, make sure to set up and clarify your party's goals for the dungeon. Usually, it's just to beat the last boss, but occasionally someone will have a special quest or ask to do an optional boss. Tell your groupmates what you want to do there, and find out what they're looking to do as well. Alright, when you get to the dungeon, there's quite a bit more that you should keep in mind, O caster of spells and shooter of arrows. As with any role, it's important to take note of which marks mean what, as well as identify the expected kill order of enemies. If you're a mage, you'll likely have a polymorph target. Hunters and warlocks, you may be asked to trap, seduce, or fear an enemy. No matter what crowd control ability is asked of you, be ready to use it, and then follow the assigned kill order. Another useful thing to do as a ranged DPS is to zoom your camera out pretty far so that you can see enemies and patrols wandering nearby. If you haven't already, adjust the system settings to increase the maximum camera distance. Moreover, you can use this command to zoom out even further than that allows. On any given pack, you're going to want to let the tank get a bit of threat before you start nuking the mobs. For smaller numbers, wait for around 3 seconds before you start attacking the first kill target. For AoE packs, however, hold for just a little bit longer, usually around 5 seconds should do. By holding for just that few seconds, you can ensure that the tank holds all of the mobs in one place, thus making the run go all that much smoother in the long term. When killing enemies, make sure that you focus down the current kill target, especially if there are only 2 or 3 mobs in the pack. Since good tanks usually focus on building threat on the next kill target or targets, it's important to burn down the current kill target as quickly as possible and then move on to the next one. Unless, of course, it's a large pack of mobs. If a pack that your tank pulls has more than 3 enemies, make use of your area of effect abilities. Blizzard, Rain of Fire, Volley, and more are all extremely useful in destroying large packs of enemies and can make your dungeon run go much faster, especially if your tank is good at AoE threat, like a paladin or druid. That said, remember to give a bit of time for your tank to get initial threat before opening up. All too often, we as DPS try to hold on to our cooldowns for boss encounters. However, since most trinkets and large cooldowns can be used once every 5 minutes or less, you should make use of them consistently throughout the dungeon. Even when you wait for the tank to establish threat before opening up, it's pretty common to over-aggro in dungeons. As such, DPS should try to drop threat often if they have such an ability. Whether you're fighting trash packs or bosses, don't wait until you've pulled aggro to use Feign Death, hunters. Another general tip for everyone doing a dungeon is to keep an eye out for runners, enemies who flee when their health gets low. As ranged DPS, however, it's especially important to do this, as you're the least likely to accidentally pull other packs while burning them down. By shooting the runners from afar, you can be the savior of your group, so hit them very hard and very fast. When the final mob in a pack dies, the first thing you should do is sit down and drink to full if you have less than 60% mana. Looting can be done anytime, but if your tank pulls and you don't have the mana to defeat the pack, you're gonna have a bad time. So, drink fast and drink often. Next up is a simple tip, but one that bears repeating. Always position yourself well. Hug walls, and take note of what mobs are around you. Typically when a butt pull happens, it's because a hunter or mage backed up a little too far or stood just a bit too close to a wandering patrol. So just be mindful of these enemies when you choose a place to shoot from. In Classic, different classes have different abilities that can be used to help the party. This means that not everyone can remove every debuff that's going out. So while priests and paladins can dispel magic and disease, only druids and mages can decurse. What's more, healers are generally focused on healing, so even if they can dispel or decurse whatever bad things are going out, they'll definitely appreciate it if you help them out with a quick click on Decursive. Finally, while you're running a dungeon as a ranged DPS, try to keep an eye on the healer. Though the tank should be holding enemies to make sure they don't target everyone else, occasionally threat is lost, especially when new adds spawn. So, as a ranged DPS, help keep an eye on the healer and use your abilities to keep him or her safe from harm should your tank be unable to defend them. Remember, healers are squishy. Alrighty, when the final boss has fallen, there's only two things left to do. Just like the melee DPS, range should make sure to add good tanks and healers to their friends list whenever a dungeon went really well. And of course, invite them to more dungeons soon. However, range should also note any great melee DPS warriors, paladins, and druids as well, as they may decide to tank dungeons in the future. Remember to mention that you're adding these players to your friends list as well, and contact them soon for another dungeon. Finally, the last thing you should do after completing a dungeon and before running the next one is reflect on your performance. While ranged DPS in dungeons isn't particularly difficult, thinking about any mistakes you made, such as a butt pull or missing an Eye of Naxxramas for example, can help you to improve future dungeon runs. Consider asking your group mates for feedback too, especially if they also play your class in some way. In general though, ranged has it pretty easy here. So, there you have it. Just a few tips and tricks for running dungeons as a ranged DPS in WoW Classic. Overall, I feel that this particular role is the easiest to fulfill, but that certainly doesn't mean it's a walk in the park. Still, as long as you know what abilities to use, how to use them, and where to stand at all times, you should have a good time. Anyway, that's it for today. If you like this guide or found it useful, then subscribe and leave a comment down below. Follow me over on Twitter for updates as well, and consider checking out my blogs over on Blogspot. Finally, if there's any particular Classic or Burning Crusade content or guides you'd like to see in the future, let me know by leaving a comment down below as well, as I love getting suggestions from viewers like you. In any case, thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and as always, take it easy guys.